Well, hello everybody. This is Robin Howe, and we are entering week 7 of our course in technology and Montessori in the elementary years. It's been a couple weeks since I've sent you a video, so I apologize for that. Um, yeah, it's been an interesting couple weeks. So before we even talk about technology, even though it's partially related, I will share, as I always do, a little insight into just how I'm doing, because I think it adds a little bit of personality to the course, which I think we're probably all more aware of now than ever, that this online delivery of education, especially when that's all you're able to do, is difficult. It's difficult to feel motivated when you don't have a personal relationship, or when you're even not able to see somebody. Um, what's going on in my world is, obviously, I run a school and I do some work for other universities, but my teachers and parents and students are going through this evolution of feelings right now towards life, and certainly towards their education. Um, what was hard about last week, which was our really our third week of online instruction, was that the kids now were becoming unmotivated, which is leading to challenges with parents and frustration by teachers. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what might have worked for week 1 might not be what's going to work for week 2 or week 3. I mean, this is maybe a ongoing challenge to figure out how we meet the needs of kids, and parents and teachers. And one of the things that I'm constantly trying to remember, both for myself and for my teachers and for my parents, is that this is all new for them, right? So we can't even look at some past history and say, okay, it's usually around week 3 when things stabilize, right? Because people respond differently, even if it's just the social isolation of being apart. There is a good article that I'm including in this week's email that talks about the option of taking kids out of education, of formal education, for the remainder of the year. Is it too much? And also an additional article I added, which is basically suggesting that your kids, even though they're going to miss out on some academic opportunities, that they will be okay. And so all these things are, forcing school leaders and teachers to try to sort of evolve on the fly, figure out, how are we going to do this? And not only how are we going to serve our families and our kids, how does our ability to serve our families and our kids impact the future and possibly the ability to stay open? And yeah, and it's really hard, and it's not black and white, and classes and communities vary significantly. One of the things that my upper elementary team is dealing with is the apathy of the upper elementary students and parents. Theoretically, this is an age group that should be should be very much able to transition to an online platform, because they're so connected, right? But meanwhile, that's also the group that it's demonstrating that needs that personal interaction to stay motivated. So, how are we gonna change to meet their needs? I don't know. It's interesting, interesting and challenging. And something else I wanted to share with you all that came out of a community meeting I had with all of my teachers and all my parents, or whoever chooses to come, is this sense of, from the perspective of the teacher, especially a Montessori teacher who is so used to, that one-on-one interaction, that emotional connection that doesn't exist with an online delivery, but a sense of failure. Even though it's not a teacher's fault that we're not able to see our kids, a sense of, we're not doing what we should be able to do to support these families. So that's perhaps an unrealistic feeling, but nonetheless real. And then there was one more, and I'm trying to think of the word that she used. So there's failure. Well, and I can't remember the word, but she basically said guilt. That's what it was. She said guilt. Parents didn't sign up to be online educators. Neither did Montessori teachers in most cases, but a sense of guilt. So in addition to our being school administrators, teachers, in addition to us trying to learn new platforms, deal with our own families, our own emotional response to this, we're also feeling a sense of failure towards our communities, and guilt towards the parents that are now having to do what we feel like should be our job, and our inability to do it compounds this whole the emotional response. So anyway, that's what I'm dealing with, and I expect some of you are dealing with something similar. Another sort of fun insight into Robin Howe's life is, so as you can see here, I don't know if I told you all I run. That's my thing. And today is Patriots Day. So today I'm supposed to be running the Boston Marathon. I am not. Obviously, I'm sitting at my home. But that's a huge loss. And yeah, and so I am going to deal with it just like we're all dealing with these huge losses. And again, if you think about things like not being able to run a race, it's all very insignificant compared to the much more. I mean, it really isn't even something worth mentioning. I feel sort of guilty even mentioning it at this point, only mentioning it just because it's what's going on in my life. But my inability to run certainly pales in comparison to the struggles that many other people are facing, whether they're economic or health or the sense of loss. So anyway, I hope you all are doing well, and I hope that you all are balancing your lives to whatever degree that you can. So back to the course. As you see in the email here, you have a couple assignments this week. Finishing To Be Like Walt, or How to Be Like Walt, and the Advanced Montessori Method, which I'll sort of speak a little bit about both of those. And then you have a paper and then a forum post. I've also added a lecture on the importance of imagination and how it leads to innovation. I thought that was like super relevant right now, and because I think when we think about imagination, we tend to think of fairies and fictional characters, and that certainly is part of imagination, but that's not it. The lecture you'll read talks about the idea of being able to imagine and sort of opening up your brain lends itself to innovation. And I think that's something really incredible that Montessori does, and it does in a deliberate way. And by does in a deliberate way means it's not just an open-ended, hey, let's promote imagination and creativity. As you all read in the Grazzini article and probably everything else you've been reading, at some level, Montessori not prohibits, but really prohibits, really strongly suggests away from fantasy, especially for early childhood children. And the reason is because at that early childhood level, their brains are still evolving, and they are not able to identify the difference between fantasy and reality. And what we're trying to do is help these young children develop a solid foundation into what their reality is, right? So we want them to be a grounded sense of self. And then as they enter that second plane, as we talked about, the reason why great lessons are given to the child in the second plane is because they are now cognitively able to think abstractly about things like time and imagination. What was before me? Also a sense of appreciation. So imagination at this second plane is a really important piece, because now, since they have that solid foundation of what is real, and they start thinking about what was and what could be, and what the Advanced Montessori Method addresses children in the second plane. And so you'll get a good oversight into different components of the elementary curriculum. But please keep in mind that what they're going to talk about in the Advanced Montessori Method, and just what we're thinking about right now, because we're talking about elementary age children, is because children at this age are different, and they are able to think abstractly and just challenge yourself to really think what that means. I think I've said it, and I'm probably redundant right now, but I can watch X-Men and say, okay, yeah, that's not real. But what things are fantasy that could relate? Are some of the technologies that are suggested possible? I don't know. But as you'll watch, if you watch that TED Talk, Um, if you can't imagine it, you certainly can't do it. And so much of what innovation is people taking something that currently exists, thinking of something different it can do or better, and then trying to make it happen. And so I would suggest for you all to think about imagination in that context. Um, yeah, I think I've talked to you all about creative destruction, but um, you know, innovation often leads to the destruction of more, uh, or renders things obsolete. But really, it's all a quest to try to do things better and differently. Um, so yeah, so okay, so that's it for today. I hope you all are doing well. I was going to talk to you a little bit about a book that's would be more geared towards uh, elementary teachers, just because it's a really solid foundation and easy read. And maybe I'll save that for next week. And I think you guys are probably overwhelmed with dealing with your own lives and your own families while also trying to stay updated with work. So I will work on getting all your work back to you this week. Again, my apologies for falling a bit behind. Maybe you guys are feeling this too, but I'm feeling screen overload. And I'm a guy that is constantly on Zoom before this happened. But now somehow the Zoom, having access in your home even, so it's not even just a school thing, in your home makes a difference. There's no separation between home and work anymore, and even time. People think, okay, well, you're at home, so a 7 o'clock phone call or a Zoom session is going to work. And so I think that, like children and families trying to figure out how things work, we're all trying to figure out how things work and figuring out how to create balance. So I'm working on that. That's my goal for this week, is to work on balance so I don't feel quite so overwhelmed. And I hope you all are doing well. And one last thing, we did have a wonderful little Zoom session a couple weeks ago. And again, these are not mandatory. It's just something to help you feel a sense of community. In that call, we were just talking about who do we want to invite as a guest, because we have that luxury. Tim Selden, who is a colleague of mine, was referenced as somebody they'd like to see, and so I've asked him to join us for a Zoom meeting. For those of you who have not met Tim or maybe have read his books, it's just kind of a cool opportunity to get something different out of this course. And so I probably will ask him and prepare him with some questions about technology. And the way I'm going to frame it, mostly because I think it'll be important or interesting for you all, is to think about early technology in Montessori. So in the year 2020, things are very different than they were in the 1970s. And Tim Selden, for those of you who do not know, his mother, Frances Littman Selden, was the founder of the Berry School originally in Washington, D.C., and now it's in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's a training center. But it's a long-time institution. And so Tim, because of his mother, grew up with Montessori, his entire life. I mean, he graduated from the Berry School probably in the 1960s as a high school senior. So he's been around Montessori. He has stories about Nancy Rambush and Mario Montessori, stuff that most people don't have anymore. And so it'd be interesting to talk to him about what was technology like? What was the, what were the conversations about regarding technology back in the 80s or the 90s when the first computers were coming out? Because I do happen to know that Tim is also a huge user of technology. And I don't remember the story entirely, but he was one of the first consumers of early personal computers. And so it'd be interesting to hear what his feedback on what it was like back in the day. By back in the day, I guess I guess it was back in the day, so we won't tell him I said that. But anyway, if you can join, it'd be great. Again, just trying to create a sense of community and make this class a little more enjoyable than just one more notch on the post, right? Which is important. So please don't feel compelled or pressured, but if you'd like to join us, I'd love to see you. And I hope you all are safe and healthy and have a wonderful day. Take care.